There's a detail about Sardinian food culture that stops people cold every single time. You cut into a wheel of cheese, and the cheese fights back. Not as a figure of speech. Tiny larvae living inside can spring out and hit you in the face. People have been documented wearing eye protection just to eat it. That's not a food dare invented for the internet. That's Casu Marzu, and Sardinians have been eating it for generations, through bans, through health warnings, through the rest of the world calling it one of the most dangerous foods on Earth. So here's the question worth sitting with. Why would an entire culture protect something like that? Not just tolerate it, protect it. The answer is more interesting than you'd expect, and by the end of this, you'll see this story was never really about maggots at all. First, let's be clear about what we're dealing with. Casu Marzu is a sheep's milk cheese from Sardinia. It starts out completely normal, a round wheel that looks like something you'd see on a rustic wooden board next to olives and bread, perfectly respectable. Then the rind gets opened up deliberately. A specific type of fly, called the cheese fly, is allowed to get inside and lay eggs. The eggs hatch into larvae, the larvae eat through the cheese. And as they eat, something unexpected happens. The inside breaks down. It becomes soft, creamy, almost spreadable. Instead of the firm texture you'd expect from sheep's milk cheese, you get something rich, deeply pungent, and almost gooey. People who really know this cheese look for tiny droplets of liquid fat seeping out of it. That's how they know the texture is right. Here's the part that genuinely surprises most people though. Traditionally, the larvae are supposed to still be alive when you eat it. If they've all died, that can actually mean the cheese has gone too far, which means the freshness test for this food is whether it's still moving. That sentence doesn't get less strange the second time you read it. And the experience of eating it is its own thing entirely. People spread it on Sardinian flatbread and drink strong local red wine alongside it. Those who've tried it describe the flavor as intensely salty, sharp, deeply funky, but also strangely creamy and rich. Like if a powerful blue cheese and a soft spreadable cheese had a very chaotic child. But the live larvae create one more complication. They jump. Not in a small, barely noticeable way. They can launch far enough that people have been known to shield their faces while eating. Some wear actual eye protection. There is, somewhere in the world, a completely genuine food tradition where protective eyewear is a practical suggestion and not a joke. That's a real sentence about a real thing. If someone wants to skip the live larvae, there's an old workaround. Seal the cheese in a paper bag. Wait. As the oxygen runs out, the larvae stop moving. You'll know it's done because the small popping sounds eventually go quiet. Practical, effective, not exactly relaxing. The obvious question is, who looked at all of this and decided, yes, this is dinner? And honestly, the answer is one of the most human things imaginable. It probably started as an accident. Centuries ago in Sardinia, sheep were central to everything. Cheese wasn't a luxury, it was survival food, calorie-dense, portable, valuable. If a wheel got exposed to flies and the texture changed, throwing it away might not have been an option. So someone tasted it anyway, which sounds reckless until you remember that most of us have stood in front of a refrigerator, sniffed something questionable, and thought, probably fine. The difference is what happened next. Instead of just tolerating it, some people came to genuinely like it. Liking turned into repeating, repeating turned into custom, and custom, over enough generations, turns into identity. That's how a lot of food traditions actually begin. Not with a master chef creating something intentional, but with people being poor, resourceful, and unwilling to waste what little they had. Here's where it gets surprising. Even with that history, Casu Marzu is officially illegal in a lot of places. Italy moved against it under food contamination laws. European food regulations effectively banned it too. The logic isn't hard to follow. Most food systems are built around preventing infestation, not serving it on bread. The United States doesn't allow it either. On paper, that should have been the end of the story. Weird cheese, fascinating history, legal ban, done. Except it didn't disappear. Even after the ban, Casu Marzu kept going. It just got quieter. It survives through families, farms, rural communities, private circles, and word of mouth. You don't walk into a shop and see a sign. You know someone who knows someone. It's basically the speakeasy version of dairy. And this is where the story shifts, because this stops being a story about a shocking food and becomes a story about something else entirely. Sardinia has actually recognized Casu Marzu as part of local traditional heritage even while the legal ban exists. So you get this genuinely strange situation where the same thing can be officially unsafe and officially culturally protected at the same time. We do this with a lot of traditions if you think about it. We romanticize them, regulate them, preserve them, and sanitize them all at once. We want the heritage, but only if it behaves itself under modern rules. And Casu Marzu has never once behaved itself. Now here's the thing that took me a while to understand about this cheese. Why is it alive with maggots? Not how, we know how. Not what it tastes like, we know that too. But why did a whole culture decide this was worth keeping? The surface answer is that the larvae aren't a flaw, they're the mechanism. Without them, it's just another sheep's milk cheese. With them, it becomes something softer, stronger, more distinctive, something locals consider genuinely unique. The living part isn't a side effect, it's the point. But that still doesn't fully explain why people kept defending it for centuries, especially once the outside world started calling it revolting and dangerous. And here's the answer that actually matters. Over time, this stopped being just cheese. For many Sardinians, Casu Marzu became a symbol of rural life, of shepherd culture, of local knowledge passed down through generations, and of resistance to outsiders deciding what counts as real food. Think about a family recipe that people outside your family find strange. Think about a food that gets laughed at until someone hears the whole story. Once a dish gets tied to grandparents and harvests and hardship and pride and place, criticizing it starts to feel less like judging a food and more like judging the people who made it. That's why it survived, not because it's convenient, because it carries meaning. The honest answer here is probably somewhat. Probably not as much as the reputation suggests, and definitely enough for regulators to feel justified. Some reports described real stomach symptoms as a possibility. Others argue the dramatic reputation has been amplified far beyond the actual medical evidence. The danger is partly real, partly exaggerated, and serious enough that saying no made sense on paper. But culturally, no was never the final word. Here's the twist I keep coming back to. The world is slowly becoming more open to eating insects, not as a dare, but for real reasons: sustainability, protein, environmental impact. That doesn't suddenly legalize maggot cheese tomorrow, but it does raise a genuinely interesting question. If insect-based foods become more accepted, does Casu Marzu start looking less like a grotesque outlier and more like a very old tradition that the modern world is only now catching up to? I don't have a clean answer to that, but I think it's worth sitting with. The line between disgusting food and cultural delicacy is not as clear as we like to pretend. A lot of what we call disgusting is really just unfamiliar. And a lot of what we call normal would probably horrify someone else if they saw it without context. So Casu Marzu isn't famous just because it has larvae in it. It's famous because it forces us to ask a harder question. When does a food stop being food and become a test of what a culture is allowed to hold on to? So here's what this story actually is. Casu Marzu is alive because that living process transforms the cheese into something unique. And Sardinia turned that transformation into tradition, identity, and a quiet kind of pride that outlasted every ban thrown at it. It never truly disappeared. It just learned to survive the way it always had, through people who knew its value, passing it quietly to the next person who would understand.
Would you ever try it once, just to know? Or is this the food where your answer is a very firm, very final, absolutely not? Drop it in the comments. I'm genuinely curious which way this audience leans. If stories like this are your thing, the real history and meaning hiding behind the world's strangest foods, hit subscribe.
This is exactly what we do here, every single day. See you in the next one.